Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inspired Messenger Show. I am your host, Mark Porteous. And this series is designed to inspire, educate, and motivate you to share your divine gifts with the world. We share information, resources, and steps that you can actually take yourself to improve your personal and your professional life so that you can better fulfill your mission. And I just feel so incredibly blessed to have these amazing mentors and guides that have come into my life so that I can help share their message and their work with you as a messenger to help you fulfill your mission and just live a more satisfactory or more charged life. And again, it's just such a great honor for me to be able to connect these beautiful, heart-centered messengers with my audience. So again, I believe that everyone on the planet has a message. Some people are here just to share their message with a handful of people. Others are here to share with hundreds or thousands or even more. And if you happen to be one of those people who's inspired to share your message professionally, whether it's as a coach, an author, a speaker, this show is going to have a lot of great tools for you. But even if you're here to reach just one or two people, if you're here as a parent, and that's your message, is to create light for your children, then there's a lot here for you as well. So I hope that you enjoy, and I'm really excited to be a part of your life and to have you in my community. Just for some logistics, of course, you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/inspired messengers. You can go to our website and learn more about becoming a messenger yourself at inspiredmessengersnetwork.com. And of course, you can sign up there for some free tools as well and check out some of the other resources that we have available for you. Our topic today is something that is really, really important to me. I got to meet our guest in person after following his work for years online, and really felt this deep connection. So I'm excited to share that connection now with you. Our guest today, Dr. Mitch Tischler, DC, has been sharing Seeing with Heart, a breakthrough journey for cultivating inner peace since 2000. In 1988, Mitch co-founded CARES, C-A-R-E-S, a medical relief organization that has provided critical healthcare services to more than 150,000 individuals in the mountains of southern Honduras. An avid sailor, photographer, and musician, as you'll see today, you'll find Mitch embracing life along the shores of Cape Cod or following his deepest passions, touching people's lives while traveling the world. Hello, Mitch. Welcome.
Hi, Mark, and hello to everyone. It's an honor and such a blessing to be with you, Mark, and this global community that we're sharing heart with today.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I love the idea of sharing heart, and certainly the idea of seeing with heart. I talk a lot about heart-centered entrepreneurs, heart-centered parenting. I think today we're really going to get down to the real core of heart by actually seeing with heart. Tell us a little bit about your background. You're a doctor, but there's just so much more to it. How did you start your spiritual path, and how did you end up where you are right now?
Well, I guess what I would say is we all start our spiritual path before we even come into this worldly realm. And so for me, I always heard that, even in my early years. So it wasn't that there was some moment where something shifted profoundly. It's something that I've heard and listened to closely. And it's interesting because you said that, this phrase, seeing with heart, and that seems to touch you, and it touches so many. That phrase, seeing with heart, the possibility of seeing with other than our ordinary eyes. And something you spoke to, you said, well, that's going to, somehow we're going to kind of get to the core of this possibility as we explore today together. And it's interesting when we look at the word core, there's C-O-R-E, you get the core of it. And there's also C-O-R, which in Latin is core, is heart. And so that's really the core, is our heart.
I love that they use the word play on words, but that dual meaning for core, and it's interesting because I didn't know that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and it's definitely an interesting use of the word core, especially in reference to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful, and the fact that, again, like you, I think since I was very young, I had this feeling that I knew this life before I got here. So I firmly believe that our souls choose the body, the time, all these little things. But for a lot of people, that might be a new understanding, or may even still be having some challenges with understanding that. But it doesn't matter really where anybody comes from as far as where they are on their path. And that's, I'd like to help people just kind of understand where you are on your path. So you've been on the path, or you've been aware of being on the path. We're all on the path, and we all have been on the path our whole life. And you're just aware that you were on the path before you got here. So you've been very conscious throughout this process, but still something, and there was maybe no major shift. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about Me Finally, the book that you're just now releasing. It's been a long process, and it's been a very personal process. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that was inspired.
So, as you mentioned, I'm a chiropractic physician. I've had a wellness center on Cape Cod for almost 30 years. I've been seeing patients. And our center is really a sanctuary. It's really an oasis for the community. And people, even as they go about their days, at times even decide to make a stop in the office without an appointment and just sit and spend a few moments having a cup of herbal tea and then going on with their day. So it's a very safe place. And through the years that I've been seeing patients, invariably, not only would there be discussion about some physical concerns, but the conversation would shift into, something that, might be a challenge, a personal challenge in their life. And there always seemed to be an answer that would emerge. And so I would share what I felt about the person's concern, and it would be supportive. And then 15 years ago, something remarkable occurred. I had a compelling feeling. It was an urgent feeling. It wasn't an anxious feeling, to get a blank piece of paper and put a pen in my other hand, my non-dominant hand. And it's interesting to note that my dominant handwriting is essentially illegible, typical doctor's writing. And what emerged were completely legible writings. And I would say something like they were very succinct, poetic affirmations. And it's interesting because a few days into this experience, I heard the name of the collection, and I chuckled because there was no collection. There was only a few writings at that point. And then a number of months later, there were many, 40, 50, 60 writings. I mean, they just continued to emerge. I didn't really sit down with an intent to write about a particular piece that could be concerning to each and every one of us. I didn't really have a subject matter. They just simply emerged. And what would happen is, as I would be in with a patient, and again, they would share something that was troubling, I would remember that there was a writing that actually spoke to their concern. So I would photocopy it and present it to them at their next appointment. And then this would continue where some of our patients ended up having a small collection of these writings. And initially they were photocopies of these writings that had emerged through my non-dominant hand. They were exactly those writings. And as time went along, individuals requested to actually just simply sit down and talk about this material because it was touching them in very moving ways, and they were experiencing shift without us actually like taking an action. It wasn't like we sat down and I had this intent to like teach them a program. It was just simply an outcome of what we were experiencing together. And so that's actually how the Seeing with Heart journey emerged. You spoke to the fact that I've been offering and presenting Seeing with Heart since 2000. That's actually how it emerged. And until recently, what we had was those writings, those succinct writings in printed form that I would use with individuals as we did this Seeing with Heart journey, one-to-one or in groups. And then there was some suggestions that it might be nice to have a book, because a one-to-one experience and a retreat isn't accessible to everyone. And so anyway, a couple of years ago, I heard in my heart that that was to occur. So I sat down, and very much like when the first writings emerged through my non-dominant hand, the same thing occurred. This time I sat at my laptop and I watched this manuscript emerge. And it's really interesting because it's not really to teach you, because really when it comes down to it, like I can't teach you anything, nor can a book. And what this book showed up as is a very reverent way to support you to make your own way, to follow your own heart. And what about the invitation for each one of us to be ourselves, to be our fullest expressions, to be me, finally? What about that possibility? And that's what this book so beautifully supports. It supports that experience. It's actually a conversation. Like I was saying, it's not a how-to, it's a conversation between actually you, the reader, and Seeing with Heart. And there's a dialogue that occurs. And although it's based on a compilation of conversations that I've had with individuals over the years, we all share common stories. And so very readily, as you begin reading this book, you find that it's your conversation, because even though sometimes our storylines are slightly like from a different place, there's really something common about them from behind the surface story. And so that's what happens. It's a very engaging experience. And that's the input that I'm getting from many that have, that have experienced this already.
And that's certainly the input that I would share. I'm realizing I had you white box, so nobody even got to see me earlier. But we met just this past summer at the Co-Creators Convergence in Colorado, and I got to read your book, the first one that you had been sharing with people, but now it was in formal print and well organized and just really nicely put together. but that it was a very personal message. And I think that's what you were trying to say, is that for me, it was sounded like I was having this conversation with my own heart, and it was, like I said, just very personal. While it's universal in theme, it brings up certain pieces of my own story, and one of those, I think, just the title alone, I think, is the one that just pops out to me as most relevant, because the theme of the event where we were was called A New Way of Being. And we did all kinds of workshops and pieces to pull out, how do we create this new way of being for all of humanity, and just for ourselves individually. And what emerged for me, the most clear message that I got, is the most powerful way that I can create a new way of being on the planet is by creating a new way of being for myself, which was exactly that, by being more of who I already am. And so the idea of exploring how to be more of me is very, very exciting. And you offer a very comfortable place to explore it, where it's not that how-to, because that's another part of it, is that there's all these formulas out there. Well, if you just do this, this, and this, you'll be happy, and life will be everything that you need. But it's different for everyone. And I feel like me finally really speaks individually to whoever's reading it. So that's not it's kind of an open-ended statement, but I didn't know if I was pausing to see if you needed to respond to that before I asked anything else.
I want to begin by expressing my gratitude, because it touches my heart so deeply when I hear that that's the experience that someone has with this. Because as I had mentioned earlier, with the most gentle and in the most respectful way, what I hear is that I really can't teach anybody anything. And for that matter, on the other side of the story, oftentimes we actually go out looking for that to teach us. And the possibility is simply to have that awareness of that which we already have. And so it's really not about a new way of being. It's simply about being our natural way of being. And so an interesting experience occurred for me. As I had mentioned, these writings began emerging. And a few days into the experience, I heard the name of the collection, and there was no collection. And then all of a sudden, quite a number of writings emerged. And then 6 months later, a writing emerged, and it was really clear that it was page one. And it speaks decidedly to what you spoke to moments ago. And I'd like to share that.
Wonderful. Yes, please. That'll be a perfect introduction to your work.
The following words flow as feelings, not thoughts, from the quiet place, the place where all is one. These words are not mine, yet they have the illusion of flowing through me. Instead, they are core truths that resonate from within each of us. If I felt they were mine, the possibility for receiving them would be not. To fully know these truths, we must step aside and authentically embrace the possibility of non-ownership. Only in this way are we open to all there is, which is only love. And only then will love flow over all in a way that one only dreams possible. Now is the time to embrace the possibility of seeing with heart.
Got a nice little wave of chills because it is an opportunity, and there were quite a few things that you just said there that I want to underline, underscore. One of them was the kind of the letting go of ownership of not yours or mine, and that can be especially challenging when it's something of a book that is of personal, and it is, you know, personal to you as well as each person who reads it. But it also speaks to kind of the broader theme of letting go and of non-attachment. Years ago, when I was first with Renee, I was practicing something called Falun Gong, and they practice the Buddhist of non-attachment, of letting go of attachment. And when you start doing that, it really brings up all of the things that we're attached to. What do you see as some of the challenges for people in letting go, and what are some of the results or the outcomes that people have once they're able to make that shift? Basically, how does letting go show up in your experience, both as a practitioner and just in your own personal life, perhaps?
It's certainly a piece that each one of us finds very challenging. And something that seeing with heart, I mean, just the phrase seeing with heart is inviting us to consider the possibility of seeing with other than our ordinary eyes. Yet, 80% of the information that we receive comes in through that lens, comes in through the visible spectrum. And when we compare the visible spectrum to the notes on a piano, it would be as if we're only hearing the 8 middle notes. And yet there's so many more notes. There's so much more music. So, you know, when we blow a dog whistle, we would say nothing happened, yet the dog's startled. When it's a full moon, the water comes farther up the shoreline, but there's no machine out in the ocean, you know, pushing the water further. And something that Seeing with Heart invites us to consider is that there are these invisible threads connecting us all as one, that there's actually far more connection than separation. In fact, there really is no separation. However, because we see through the narrow bandwidth, in comes the alluring call of the mind. And isn't it interesting that if 80% of the information comes in through this lens, and you know what's right behind our eyes but our brain?
Mm-hmm.
So the first words that emerged from Seeing with Heart, March 4th, 2000, simply be present in the infinite moment, seeing with heart, not listening with head. And yet, because we're hardwired that way, that's the way it would be predictable for us to navigate. And so it makes it extremely challenging to let go. There's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a much fuller story. And for this conversation, I'll begin in that way of what I hear as I listen to what Seeing with Heart has invited me to consider. Because again, what we're sharing here, it's not, you know, Mitch's way to happiness. That will never work. These are core truths which resonate from within each of us. And yet, we can take a look at pictures and start to get some type of a handle on why we're actually moving about the way we're moving about. And so it's actually rather predictable that we would have a very challenging time letting go, because through the narrow bandwidth, I see beautiful things. And not that there's anything wrong with the thing. It's just that, gosh, I really worked hard for this house, so I want to keep it. And I came home from work and it had burned to the ground. So all my belongings are gone. It's very challenging to accept that, to be in acceptance of that. And there's another way of looking at all of our occurrences. As I suggested, that's a much fuller conversation. But for right now, maybe that will speak to the question that you were asking.
It absolutely does. And yeah, there's obviously a whole lot more that can be said about that. And later on in the call, we'll actually share something even more personal, kind of addressing the letting go piece of it. We'll get some of that extra texture in there with your music. But you also kind of alluded to a couple of things there. One was that it's not a manual. You do have a lot of powerful exercises in the book. I mean, you've basically taken a lot of the training that you've done in your workshops and everything else and included that as part of the book, so people can really go through the steps themselves in a very personal way. But you also do have some general things, like you said, the conversation is very universal. And I think it really does apply to all of us, that these are universal truths that you're incorporating in this. So there are certain things that you can do to kind of steps that people can take right now to improve their lives. And we would like to look at some of that to share just a sample of how it's not a done for you solution, but it's a working with you type of opportunity to create greater ease and more flow in someone's life. Do you want to touch on a little bit about that? Because again, I know we could go really deep on any one of these topics, but this is something I think people could really walk away with right now.
Okay, so I feel to share a writing.
Great.
And that may bring us further into this question that you're raising for us to look at. Everything begins with loving the self. Yet we're so terribly afraid of I love me. We listen instead to the voice that's so haunting, the one from so far away. Don't be so selfish. You must think of the others. And don't hug yourself or spend time with your soul. For remember, there's nothing to show from these pleasures, nothing productive, nothing to weigh. No, cries your spirit. This is not about selfish. It's about the importance of caring for self and doing exactly what one needs in the moment by feeling with gut the feeling of true. For being authentic with spirit and soul is the one single choice that will move us to whole. Only then can I love me and can I love you as they're actually but one and the same.
Well, that for me brings up a whole other thing. And I think maybe that's the one thing, I guess, that we can all do to create greater flow and ease in our life and to love other people better, which is what you're talking about, the self-love. And it's funny that you bring that up because it is such a challenge. It's so easy for us to express love for other people. And yet, yeah, all those same issues that you bring up there come up for me of saying, oh, no, it's always about the other person, but we can only love others as much as we love each other, love ourselves. So how do you start that process? How do you begin to love yourself when you don't?
So the Seeing with Heart journey is like baking a cake. And, you know, like you can have the finest ingredients. And if you don't start by greasing the pan, you know, like put all the ingredients in the pan and you put it in the oven, and 30, 40 minutes later, you come back into the kitchen, and I mean, the aromas are incredible. And then you take it out of the oven and you go to take it out of the pan, and it's stuck and it crumbles, like we all experience in our personal lives as well. At times, our lives kind of crumble.
Mm-hmm.
So the way this actually is the most effective is to actually bake this cake. And that's what Seeing with Heart does, is it supports us to assemble an extremely light, extremely accessible, and effective framework. In fact, when we take the picture of a chair, most of us know that, you know, like a chair would have 4 legs. And what Seeing with Heart invites us to consider is that oftentimes in our lives, we make like these 44-legged chairs. We just make these like incredibly complicated structures around ourselves so that as life occurs, as it has a knack of doing it, more than, 3 miles an hour, sometimes more than 3,333 miles an hour, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do right now? And, like, oh, right, in this situation, I do this, and in that situation, I do that. And in real time, that doesn't actually become effective, because it's in a way very paralyzing, because we've got these very, very heavy structures, these 44-legged chairs that we built around ourselves. Well, like a 2-legged chair would fall over. A 4-legged chair is actually what I'm sitting on right now. However, do we really need 4 legs? We could have 3.
Mm-hmm.
A stool, okay? A 3-legged chair. And that's what Seeing with Heart does. It assembles a 3-legged chair, a stool, so it's a very light, stable framework to navigate. Having said that, let's paint a picture. So we're going to kind of go past the greasing the edge of the pan.
All right, next step.
All right. But for something as a takeaway, a picture that we can use to navigate immediately, instantly, it's something that we can all relate to, because I felt to read that writing that speaks to the love of self, because that really gets to the core, the COR, our heart. Because really, when we come down to it, that's our center. Like, not our shoulder, not our head, it's our heart. So that being said, let's take a look at a structure that most of us are familiar with, the Hoover Dam. It's a really enormous wall, a very thick, extremely thick wall. And behind the wall of the Hoover Dam, for all intents and purposes, how much fluid is there?
Yeah, it's unfathomable to me. I mean,
right. So essentially an infinity of fluid.
Sure.
At least hypothetically, for this particular picture that we're painting. And what's the goal? What's the function of the Hoover Dam? To provide what?
Electricity.
Right. So that's energy. Okay. Right. To provide electricity. To provide light. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's say we have this device, this theoretical tool that could pierce the wall of the Hoover Dam with a very, very small diameter, so that it would be like a pinhole. And it would go all the way through this very, very thick wall, and there'd be a pinhole. What would the fluid emerging through that wall look like?
Fire hose.
And, would it be somewhat like kind of like a trickle compared to the, vast amount of water that's behind if it's a pinhole?
Right.
So then this device, we can open up the diameter. This hypothetical device actually has the capacity to open up its diameter, so it can actually make an increasingly larger hole in the wall. And as we do that, what happens to that flow of fluid?
It increases.
Less strong, or does it get more strong?
More strong.
And there's a point well before we open up that device to 90% of the diameter of the wall, well before we get to 50% of the diameter of the wall, there's a point where we open up the diameter of this device enough whereby what would happen to the wall?
Collapse.
Right. It would just, the power of the fluid behind would literally blow the wall open, shards and all. And so what about the wall of our Hoover dams? What about our radiant, beautiful hearts? What about our core? What do we do with our core? What do we do with the walls of our Hoover dams, our hearts? So the possibility is to actually look at our heart having a fluctuating aperture, an opening that at times is very pinched down and only allowing a trickle of the infinity of love that resides ever so slightly behind our radiant, beautiful hearts. And it only requires a simple shift. It only requires that opening to increase even a very small amount. And all of a sudden, we'll experience that same phenomena of having that infinity of love that resides ever so slightly behind our radiant, beautiful hearts come pouring through, just like the fluid, the water behind the wall of the Hoover Dam. Now, the key is to at least invite ourselves to consider that that has nothing to do with that which is out in front of ourselves. It has nothing to do with the other, whatever the other is, the life partner, the sibling, the employer, the employee, the things that we get, whatever it is, it only ever has to do with everything begins with loving the self. Yet I'm so terribly afraid of I love me. And so when we take a look at our life situations and always return to that place of accepting self, then what will eventuate will be a fuller expression, a fuller flow, and manifesting abundance. So it's actually something that mechanically we can do. We can actually have that image of the pinhole and then having a device that opens up the aperture even more, and it doesn't take having to open the aperture fully before the wall of the Hoover Dam is going to literally just blow open because of the infinity of water behind the wall, because of the infinity of love that each one of us already has. We know that. Each one of us knows that there really isn't a finite amount of love. It doesn't matter whether you have another pet added to your home, another child, whether somebody comes to stay with you that doesn't have housing, you love them just the same. There's an infinite amount of love, period. There's an infinite amount of love. And so as we open that up from within ourselves, what I'll say is, don't believe a word of what I'm saying, because I'm not here to teach. See how that, see what happens as we explore that possibility. There's a phrase that Seeing with Heart has shared, 9 words. I be love, I be me, I be we. So to the extent that I be love, that's the wall of the Hoover Dam. That's the aperture of our hearts. I be love. It's the extent that I be me. Because we all know what happens when we kick dirt, we make dust storms. So the thing is, we know those people. We even may be one of them. But we certainly know those people that are just kind of saying, well, I can't. I'll never be, that's great that you can do that, but I'll never be able to do that. And so that's the pinhole aperture. That's so much self-judgment. That's so much lack of self-acceptance. That's so much self-loathing. That pinhole aperture is not going to manifest abundance. It's going to be a trickle. That person's not going to be in their power. And so what they're going to be doing is looking deeply outside of self to actually receive the energy to be sustainable. So I be love. So to the extent that I be love, I be me. And to the extent that I be me, to the extent that I accept myself and I be in that place of unconditional acceptance of self and stop judging myself, is to the extent that I be we. Is to the extent that I can interact with you in a way that will support each other for each other to emerge, for each other to be me, finally.
I don't know if that's what you were talking about, that those 9 words as being the 3-legged stool, but I see them as being the 3-legged stool because the step 1 is I be love, and then that alone I want to work on a little bit more, and then I be me. I'm working on that a whole bunch so that we can get into the I be we. But just the I be love. Again, you talk about this image, and I can see the image. And is the image enough? Is that all we need to drill through the hole, or is there some other way to drill through that hole when we have all these reasons not to love ourselves, all the fallibilities that we're aware of, and how do you drill that first pilot hole?
I prefaced all this by saying that when we bake a cake, we have to grease the pan. So, the Seeing with Heart journey it's a 12-session experience. It's a 12-session journey. And so, in the time that we have today, to actually be able to create for each one of us to create our own stable framework is not realistic. However, what happens is, as we start to explore some of the relevant pieces, simply be present in the infinite moment, seeing with heart, not thinking with head. So there's tools that as we go along the way, that we actually can invite ourselves to put in our heart pocket so that they're actually accessible and available. And so we look at pieces like feeling, not thinking. Because when we stay in that place of our heart center and we trust our gut, then we always end up precisely where we need to be. And when we go into that place of our thinking experience, which is, again, we're hardwired because it's right behind where the largest amount of information is received. So we tend to think our way And so as we start to look at feeling, not thinking, from within without, from within the place of without expectation. So when we start to take a look at what it means to actually be able to be in that place of acceptance and not in that place of resistance. So we actually have this little phrase that we can carry around, and we can catch ourselves throughout our days saying, okay, from within without. It's a simple phrase to carry in our heart pocket, from within without, from within the place of without expectation. So there's something that we go through that Seeing with Heart refers to as blink. And it's a very, very effective picture that Seeing with Heart paints. So the simple word of blink, the action of blink. So many people come to me and share with me how potent that is. Like they'll literally actually blink. So when they're in the middle of a challenging situation, they blink, but it's not an empty experience of just blinking. Once we fill in the picture, or just as we did with the Hoover Dam, when we fill that picture in a blink, so what happens is we go along the journey and we actually assemble pieces of the framework. And the reason, and I've done this with hundreds and hundreds of people, this has really literally touched the lives of thousands. I'm not out in front of you, pulling you along, saying, come on, Pokey, let's get going. Okay, and I'm not behind you, pushing you, saying, boy, wow, you don't really get this. You know, you're really... I don't teach the Seeing with Heart journey because it won't work. It's not sustainable. What is sustainable is when we lock hearts through the illusion of our elbows and we take a stroll down this path. And that's what I do, because I actually enjoy doing this journey so much that I just love to do it. So then I just lock my elbows with you, Mark, and we just take a walk. As on any journey, we go down a path, we go along a path. And as we go along the path, we notice things along the path. And as we do, we maybe, you know, collect this little piece and that little piece, but we're both collecting those pieces so that by the time we get done, you've actually assembled your own framework. And what I've done is assembled mine. And so it's like any endurance event, you know, like we couldn't go out and necessarily like do a triathlon right now. However, by the time we get done with the Seeing with Heart journey, we actually not only have the skills, the tools, but we've actually started to, you know, exercise into that possibility of creating the you know, the stamina and the endurance to embody that. And so even the image of the Hoover Dam, I mean, it's such a vivid image that people are going to actually, like, I just know that. I know for myself, and I know for others that, like, I get cut into the middle of the journey, and I know we can. I mean, it's more stable when we put, you know, some of the preliminary pieces in place, but we can all get this. We can all get that. Wow, there's a lot. There's just that, you know, there's essentially an infinite amount of fluid behind the wall of the Hoover Dam. I'm never going to forget that. And wow, I've got an infinite amount of love behind my heart. But you know what? Right now, I'm actually being a pinhole aperture, and that's not going to work. It needs to be open. And I don't have to open it a lot. It only takes a small action of self-care. I've done this journey with so many individuals, and here's a magnificent example of this. It was a person that was deeply struggling, substance abuse, kind of actually like, you know, 1 foot in jail and 1 foot out. It was a very, very challenging situation. We got a few sessions in, and the person was quite vibrant when we began for the day. I said, "Jesus, is there anything you feel to share?" And they said, "Well, I feel a lot different." I said, "Well, what happened?" They said, this is what I did. Before I went to sleep last night, I picked up all my dirty laundry off my bedroom floor and I brushed my teeth. That's all it took. That action of self-care. Everything begins with loving the self. Yet we're so terribly afraid of I love me. We listen instead to the voice that's so haunting, the one from so far away. That's what we do. So a simple action of self-care and the wall of the Hoover Dam blows open. It doesn't take much. It's a simple shift.
That for me is the big takeaway, because I was looking for how do we stretch out that aperture, that increase that pinhole, and I really feel like you nailed it right there with just brushing your teeth. It just seems so simple. And for others, it might be a different thing. It might be getting themselves buying some music for yourself, or a new outfit, or taking yourself out to eat or for a walk. I know music can be a good thing, meditating, but whatever that is, it sounds like the more self-care you give yourself, the more you're able to be love and be me.
And the invitation that I hear from Seeing with Heart is to do that when it's inconvenient. See, it's really easy, like on a Sunday afternoon when, I don't know, the family's taken care of and it's, you've already cleaned the house, and okay, so I'm going to go down to the beach and have a walk. It's me time. How about, like at 5 o'clock in the evening when, dinner's supposed to be on the table, and you actually decide that I'm going to go to meditation class because I matter. And I'm going to ask other family members, to do different parts of the preparation. Could you set the table? Could you put the potatoes in the oven at 520? I'll put the timer on so you'll hear it ring. So it's not like you're walking out of, yet it's an action of self-care when it's inconvenient. That's really potent, because that's when we typically go into our head and say, well, I shouldn't, I can't, I gotta be. And we need to have that. We authentically need to have that in our awareness, is to be love when it's actually inconvenient.
Beautiful. Two really big things. Again, starting with the self-care, and I love that idea about doing it when it's inconvenient. Because it does seem so simple when everything is already aligned, and so many people wait for the self-care too till when everything is aligned, and that's so rare. Even on a Sunday afternoon when everything, there's always something else to do, and I've noticed for myself that's been one of the biggest challenges. Even things like doing my morning rituals, whether it's working out or meditating, sometimes even showering gets put off until the afternoon, because like, oh, there's so much to do. And on those days, I always feel like those are the difficult days, where no matter what's going on, I take even just 10 minutes to sit and be quiet and meditate and be still. I feel better. I feel more love for myself, just in those things. So you really made it clear with those examples that it's not complicated.
And I imagine that when you do that, there's actually a visceral experience. It's palpable. You will feel something. And when I say you, I mean like the generic, each and every one of us, okay? But okay, so you just gave an example. So I'm going to ask that question. I bet you actually feel differently when you do that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
And where do you feel it?
Clearly in my heart.
So like, it's not our shoulder, it's not our finger, it's not our head, it's in our heart. And what does that actually feel like? Does it feel all pinched up and tight and closed, or what does it feel like?
Expansive, absolutely.
Expansive. So that's the fluctuating aperture. So that little action of self-care, and then you actually feel that in a visceral way.
And it goes back to the Vancouver analogy. Like I can really connect with that now, because on those days I feel like I have more power, more energy.
And that's actually where authentic power comes from, is from that love, that infinite well that resides within each of us, that infinite potential. And so when we open up the aperture, we flow that in its abundance, in its fullness. Mm-hmm. And it's remarkable what manifests.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mitch, It's so wonderful to be able to see you and connect with you. I feel like giving you a big hug right now, and I'm grateful that we get to begin this journey or taking the next steps on this journey. And I feel like we have a long way to go together. And I want to bring as many other people along for the ride. I want to encourage everyone to go to pick up your book that you just released. It is on Amazon, I'm assuming, and it's also on your website. I think you're doing something right now where you can actually, it's not even out yet. It's just coming out in a couple more days, but people can pre-order and actually get a signed copy directly from you. Where do they go to get that?
So the book actually is live on Amazon.
It is, okay.
So, people have, been ordering now from Amazon. It's in Kindle as well. And when somebody feels to have a signed copy, you can order that from the website. And so that's, from mefinally.com.
Beautiful. And also anybody who wants to get, to see your first book, which is the one I have, the Seeing with Heart, they can actually download that right below this video. You can actually download Seeing with Heart by hitting the bonus button and get to start that journey. You also actually have some of the original handwritten copies on your website, correct?
That's correct. So if you feel moved, I invite you to go either to mefinally.com or seeingwithheart.com, and there's a tab at the top that says original writings, and so there's a few examples. Most of them came through as vertical columns, as you'll see one of the examples, but two showed up quite differently. One was a spiral, and one was this three-dimensional expanding sphere, and it's absolutely profound what they speak to. That's further along in the journey, and there's some very, very intriguing surprises in this story as you go further along and embrace what Seeing with Heart is inviting us to consider. Some very, very profound, potent messages. And so that's about the situation spiral and the situation sphere. So you can see those on the website. And certainly, if you feel to drop me an email if there's any questions, I'd be delighted to respond to those as well.
Great. What is your email? You want to share that?
It's Mitch, M-I-T-C-H, at seeingwithheart.com. It's also on the website. It's the contact page. So in case you don't have a way to write this down right now, it's there as well. But it's Mitch at seeingwithheart.com.
Wonderful. And again, I encourage everyone to download the book for free right there on the site for Seeing with Heart. And again, that's just the beginning of the journey. That was the original writings that came out. Now you've got the full-length book, Me Finally. I encourage you to get the autographed copy. But whatever you're moved to do, we're at our hour. But if you've got a few more minutes, if you're interested, I know you had made an offer for sharing one of your other gifts. Do you have a couple more minutes that you could share that with us? Or you want to?
I would love to. As long as that's okay with your time as well.
Absolutely. Again, when we're at this event, I'll let you set up while I'm kind of just sharing the background. Again, we were at this live spiritual retreat, and one of the events there was doing the labyrinth, which I had never been exposed to. And during our last walk in the labyrinth, you got to share this musical gift of yours, and you're going to actually be able to share that with all of us today. An instrument that many of us have probably never seen, you may have heard, and then also a very powerful chant. We've spoken a little bit to the idea of letting go. So this chant is a special tool along with this music, just an extra bonus for this call today. So hopefully you enjoy this as much as I do.
This is an ancient Sanskrit chant, Om Namah Shivaya, and it embraces the energy of and supports the energy of letting go. And this instrument, the harmonium, is an ancient Indian organ, and it's hand pumped. The bellows are pumped, and that drives air through the instrument so that then the instrument will make music, will make sound.
Thank you for that extra gift. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me with you today. It's always beautiful to connect with you. We have such a deep heart connection, and it's a blessing. And I'm in such gratitude for, being able to share this time with you and each one of those that were drawn to be with us as we share this possibility, the possibility of seeing with heart.
Thank you so much, Mitch, for your sharing. Thank you for your music. Thank you for your presence in the world. And I'm just really, really excited about being on the journey with you. So thank you. And I do have one last personal thing. Anybody who hasn't noticed this enormous tree inside of your office, have you named your tree?
That's so funny. Nobody's ever asked me that. And so the answer is no, because there really are no things. It's love. And so, yeah, I've been seeing patients in this room for almost 30 years. And all I've ever done is water this tree once a week. That's it. It started out as in a little container, and it's grown and grown. And along the way, I put it in a bigger container. And what I could say is, if this tree could talk, the stories that it's heard, and it's all love. It's all wrapped around sharing love.
Well, even in that last little personal piece, I got another wave of chills, and there were two things. Just kept watering it, and then for me, love is the water. And as we continue to water it, our container needs to get bigger, and that's what we're all working on, growing a bigger container. So, thank you for watering us with your love and creating that visualization of a bigger container for all of us.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, everyone.
Much love. Yes. And yes, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for being here and spending time with us. Remember, you are a brilliant beacon of light in the world. Keep shining brightly. Namaste.
Namaste.